people making a killing are the Beats and the stuff. So in the consumer low end price points.
Yeah, in fact, anyone want to check on what they sold that company for to Apple?
Right, you don't see any high end companies selling for crazy numbers.
Oh, it was in the billions, I think.
We've been in business a little while now. We've been shipping headphones over 10 years. So with that, we managed to get our fair share of negativity and negative reviews. And it kind of is always a curious thing. And I would imagine other people are wondering, what does it matter? How does it affect us? What do we think about the negativity?
What do we think?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well,
try not to.
That's one
that's one method. Yeah. Not sure it's the most productive.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes negative things, negative reviews, negative comments can be constructive. So you got to look at it and say, well, is the negativity accurate? First of all, is it something that we should address? Are they accurate in this negativity, or is it just that particular individual? Because you one thing I could think of, like when you look at someone says something negative, you don't go changing the company because of it. You don't completely eliminate a product because of it. You don't wipe out a design because of it. You look at it objectively and go, wow, is that negativity warranted? And then if so, is this something we need to address now, later, whatever?
Right. I think here's the first thing to always consider. Whenever you have a company trying to do things, like we're trying to make high-end headphones, you got to assume typically people have positive intents with these things. And I think in our case, that's definitely the circumstances. We have a group of people that are trying their best to produce a good product, a good headphone, and they want it to be all the things. They want it to last a long time, be as inexpensive as possible, be as good as possible, all the things, right? Of course. Now, obviously, there's constraints around that, and it makes it hard to do, and you don't always win everyone. And everyone's aware of that. I think, especially as an engineer, I think we tend to be very rational and realistic about these things. We tend to be overly cautious and conservative.
We certainly in our designs are covering as many bases as we can think of, as many
We're thinking,
possible
how can
angles.
this go wrong? How can we stop it from being an issue?
Right. And as time goes on, of course, we get better and better at that because all that is hindsight. All the things that were an issue are no longer an issue.
Right.
They were solved.
But with that, what that means is, especially if you're actually designing and manufacturing the thing, the most important feedback by a mile is negative. Positive feedback is almost worthless because then it says, everything you thought was right, you were right. It just reaffirms and revalidates your thoughts, your feelings.
Well, we like to hear positive.
That's nice to hear, obviously, but it doesn't provide you with the iteration. It doesn't provide you with any step to move forward. And that's, of course, always the goal, to improve. So negativity is phenomenal in that sense. I think a lot of people feel that way. You see a negative thing, you say, okay, they could take that, they could improve their product, they could iterate and make it better. And that's true, as long as the person that's making this negativity understands everything that's going on, right? Because a lot of times there's things that are unspoken, unknown, and you don't know all the data.
They have to understand the design philosophy for one, and because they may be picking on something that was meant to be that way.
Right. Sometimes.
I mean, it was made to be that way, and maybe it ain't right for you, but it's the way the thing was designed to be.
Right.
Yeah.
So
there's one example that just keeps coming up that I was thinking about, and that's like when they launched the yoke steering wheel in Model S, and they knew people, it was going to be polarizing and everything, and obviously they had the ability to they had the technology to make a round steering wheel.
It's like an IndyCar type.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And they had reasons why, it could be a good thing, and but in the end, after what was it, a year or two, they finally like, all right, fine. We'll give you the option to get around wheels. They finally caved to all the negativity around the.
I mean, we get that because we're kind of like that too. We're trying to be more cutting edge on certain facets of headphone design, and it's misunderstood. Many times it's misunderstood.
Right.
You got to get that.
The hard thing is, you always are trying to do your best to make the best product. I think that's the case for most companies, and inevitably, there's always some misunderstanding. And it could be that you didn't understand your consumer. It could be you didn't understand your manufacturing process. It could be the consumer doesn't understand the product. Or maybe they thought it was something different than it was because of how it was marketed.
I think what I see is people are accustomed to a certain thing, the way certain things are done. They're just accustomed to it. So now when you break away from the norm as a design or as a manufacturing process or whatever, right? Yeah. They're looking at it as, well, this isn't what I'm used to. This is what I'm accustomed to. And that could be construed as a negative.
Right.
But the reality is maybe you just got to get used to that. Maybe it's better. Maybe you don't know it's better until you live with it for a while.
that happens a lot. Where things are like in its day were hated, and then 100 years goes by and everybody's like, this is how everything is now.
Yeah.
And you didn't realize that there was a point where when that first came out, everybody hated it. It's like when like the split window Corvette in the 60s came out. Everybody hated it because it obstructed your view.
Yeah, right.
It was worse.
It was a small window to begin with.
Yeah, and then so people were converting them in the day to like the prior year to a full-size window.
Yeah.
And now they ruin the value of those vehicles because now everybody wants.
It's coveted.
Yeah, right.
It's rare. Yeah,
it's rare because nobody wanted it.
Yeah, right.
Nobody bought it. Right. That's the thing that nobody tells you
now
about.
it's the coolest thing since sliced
now
bread.
you want one.
And that's the issue. You get that, and especially if you're designing the product, you tend to be well aware that this is the case. That humans are intrinsically going to have a bias to keep things the same, almost always. You see something new, and the first reaction is always, "Oh, I don't want that." So it's hard to know, is this actually a step forward? Because you're always expecting the negativity out the gate. And occasionally people fade into, actually, this is great. So it's hard to know, like, where's the balance? How do I know how much I could shift things and have it be received well?
I know when our first model was the AB1266, right? Yeah. And it was completely different than anything else. And I mean, that was like a full out first year of negativity for starting a new business. It was just, people were just brutal with it. Torture device. Everyone knows the saying on it, but it's like, but once they started realizing how it worked and why it was made, which took a few more years, right? Why it was made. And of course, back then, too bad we didn't have a YouTube channel to explain this stuff like we did now. But, there's a whole design philosophy around the lack of clamping force, which is, there's not a lot of ways to do that.
Not really.
You've got to have a horizontal bar to bring the speakers down and hold it on your head.
Yeah, or some sort of like grabbing pad that pushes it off or something.
Yeah, right. So, bottom line is there wasn't a lot of ways to do that. And that happened to be our design of choice. And I mean, part of it was to get attention, and it worked really well. We got negative and positive attention, but we got a lot of attention. Mm-hmm. So it actually launched the Abyss brand, so to speak, and it was done purposely on a lot of respects. So, it was, so even the negativity is what I'm saying can be positive.
So that's sort of the thing. And I think there's a lot of points here. So initially, when we started shipping things, occasionally you see people talking negative about things. And I always try to figure out the reasoning behind why people would say what they say. Because sometimes they're saying this because they didn't understand the product. And that's potentially a failure on our end or the dealer's end or someone because they didn't explain it, they didn't describe it, they didn't tell them what they're doing, right? Maybe the literature doesn't describe it, whatever, right? Or it could be that the product has an issue, right? You've got to consider all the facets around it because a lot of times what people say, positive or negative, is missing things. There's a lot of components missing, and you need to kind of figure out why they're saying
I guess, yeah, you can get that because they only, people only construe the final, whatever it is they're commenting about, positive or negative. They don't know the steps involved in getting to that finished product or why it was made the way it was made. So I get that, and I mean, you see this from everybody, and it's the same with positives too, really. I mean, it's not just negatives.
Oh, absolutely.
People love the shit out of things and other people hate it.
No, yeah.
And it has nothing to do with anything, right? It could be, the turtle on the engraved on the headband, or so to speak. So yeah, it's funny. But I mean, in general though, I mean, I think what we found over the years with the headphones is positive and negative all turn out to be attention for us. It gets attention to us. Mm-hmm. We seem to be mentioned a lot in terms of the high end of headphones everywhere, in positive and negative sides of the spectrum.
It's a little surprising because you would think externally that, oh man, somebody said some negative thing about this. That must be bad for the company. It really isn't usually. You look at this is the case for almost every company. It takes a lot for it to actually matter. Usually, especially when it's a small company, negativity ends up being positive, which is very interesting, but it's almost always the case.
Well, remember when the first iPhone came out and how negative everybody was? It's like, who's going to, I mean, and all the other, that was the other thing. All the other,
like Steve Ballmer talking
all
about
the phone companies were like, who's going to buy a $600 phone and all that?
Yeah, right.
And now nobody thinks anything, $600, that's like mid-range now.
Well,
yeah.
But at the time, like all your legacy your
price,
phone manufacturers were like, nobody's going to buy that.
Well, price is an easy thing to bash.
Yeah.
You see that all the time. In fact, that's probably the most negativity we see about our products is people bashing prices.
Well, the curious thing is people don't always look into these things, but a lot of times the reason why people are attacking the product is because of the price. But the thing that gets me is they don't say it's because of the price. And they may not be consciously aware of it, but a lot of times you'll see people arguing online like they like doing. And they'll say, oh, I hate this, I hate that, I hate that. And then you start digging into some random stranger comes on and starts fighting back and forth with them. And it always comes out that the reason why they don't like it is because they can't afford it. It's too expensive. They don't think that it's worth it, or they think the company's making too much money because they're selling it at this price. That's
a tough thing to understand, because, you know, in our market segment, you know, we're making a very high-end product, and it is going to be expensive. Unfortunately, we weren't in the business of designing low-cost headphones. It just isn't what we do. And, you know, we're looking at that end of it to see what we could do. But, you know, the thing is, we're making product here, we're machining it here. It's a low-volume business, and it's a niche. And, you know, it's not Beats. It's just not. And, you know, I mean, you could probably make a model set that's called not Beats. And
well, the silly thing is,
it's not.
Across the high end, it's almost universally the case. There is very little money in the expensive products, which is curious because they're the ones that get all the negativity, right? High price point, people say, oh, they must be making a killing. People making a killing are the Beats. And the stuff selling the consumer low-end price points.
Yeah, in fact, anyone want to check on what they sold that company for to Apple?
Right. You don't see any high-end companies selling for crazy numbers.
Oh, it was in the billions, I think.
I can't remember the number. It's been so long.
It was a lot.
Yeah, it was a lot.
And that was before they sold it to Apple. Now it's obviously
it was a
more.
ridiculous number, but maybe it was $3 billion.
Yeah, but look how many headphones they make now.
Yeah, right.
Like, you put it on a chart, they're like almost all of them. We're not even on that chart, even if we were like displaying.
Not even close.
Right.
Yeah, not even. We're in the what would you call it? The lowest possible volume segment there is where us high end guys are, and but yet that's the thing, right? But anyway, enough. We've done videos on this before. Enough concentrating on price, but that I think you're right though. It tends to be where people do focus the most on is the price, you know, and for this price it should do this or it should do that, and it's like, well, that's not really isn't how it works. I mean, you know, it's like, you know, cars don't fly for a reason, because they're cars. Right. Sports cars don't drive off-road because they're sports cars.
Well,
and
some do.
just because there's a price involved doesn't mean it's supposed to do something or not do something.
The curious thing about that point is people will commonly say that at this price it should do this, it should have that, or whatever. That's fine. That's potentially valid criticism. However, a lot of times there is a product that already exists that does that. So it's like this weird thing. If you're designing a product, should you make a product that's very similar to another product? Does that make sense to design? If you're talking low volume, relatively low margin, not huge number of profits, why would you make a product that already exists? Right? Like it does. There's competition there. Right. Whereas if you make a product that's different, you're offering something that provides, I think, more value to the consumer. It's unique.
Right.
Well, it seems to be more rational.
The example I always remember, like when DVD players started to get hit high volume, you know, like everybody had one. They're selling millions of them. They're like $30.
It took a while.
Yeah, but once it got there, the higher end in DVD players you went, the less features they usually had. Yeah. The cheap ones had they would play any format right there, because they were producing them at such a volume, and they just were keeping up with all the latest stuff, where the highest end stuff was way more expensive, but it would just play DVDs, right? It wouldn't play any of the new formats.
Or CDs.
Because they were just focused on making the video look better, and that was all they cared about, right?
Yeah.
So
that's
more
true.
Niche,
yeah, I mean, they focused on the video circuitry.
Yeah.
You know, better power supplies, less noise.
Instead of just features,
the things that actually cost more to produce,
the hard stuff
is in the box. But see, people don't see that. They see the box, and it puts out video, and they connect it to a screen, and lo and behold, it works just like everything else.
Because I mean, I had a relatively expensive Yamaha DVD player back then, and it's like it would get frustrating because like, I wanted to play like other formats and stuff, and like this $20 one could do it, right?
It's sort of an issue though, because that's mostly marketing, and that's where a big discrepancy comes in. You look at something like computer parts or something like that. SSDs is a great example. People will buy SSD based on the read to write speeds. That's the maximum amount of data you could put in or out of the drive. But those are so incredibly misleading, almost useless numbers, because they only work in narrow circumstances. A lot of times it only work for 10 seconds or something.
The best case scenarios.
Right. Yeah. And if you write to it continuously, like we do for our video editing computer over here, we're writing at 2.4 gigabytes per second the whole time we're recording this. If you do that kind of throughput on a modern SSD, even if it says 7,000, it'll give up and it won't be able to handle that after 30 seconds or something. And they don't tell you that.
Right.
And you can make a product that handles that, but the numbers are typically lower. Like these drives only do 1.4 gig a second. So you look at the numbers, you say, oh, it's worse. But for this, it's better. So there's always like these kind of behind the scene things where people are trading this off for that. And it's hard to advertise this because somebody already advertised it misleading.
Well, that's why like we always recommend to people, you know, if you're going to get at go at the higher end of things, you kind of got to live with it for a while. Like, you know, people judge things in 15 million increments and call it a day or whatever it is, or, you know, and I tried it sucks, or I tried it, it's great. It's like,
you get a lot of those.
Yeah, I mean, it could go either way, right? But it's like the ones that suck are like, well, but did you know that it did this? Did you know that you can adjust? Did you know? And they're like, invariably, it's like, oh no, I didn't know you could do that. It's not a simple tool. It's not a hammer. It's not a screwdriver. You know, it's more of a complex thing you're dealing with because it interacts with you, your environment. Like I'm talking about headphones. Something like that is very complicated. It interacts with the system, your music, you know, it's a complex system where, you know, you take a flat blade screwdriver, right? Aside from it not breaking and being the right size for the screw you're turning, it's a
little
basic
easier
tool,
to evaluate,
right? It's easy to understand. Okay, you can judge the grip of it. You know, it's a simple thing, right? I get all that. You know, you got Linus with LTT with his. They made the ratcheting screwdriver.
Well, ratcheting changes the game.
Yeah, but that thing's been. But I mean, even then, like you know, they made. I think they made videos about taking shit for an expensive screwdriver, which is relatively speaking, anyone buys.
For his audience, it's a very expensive screwdriver, right, but compared to high-end screwdrivers, it's not expensive.
Yeah. So, and they made a pretty nice screwdriver, right?
Apparently.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't use that stuff, so, I don't do ratcheting screwdrivers, so I don't care. I got a Phillips bit chucked in my drill.
But it's always like that. And he does take a lot of negativity for that. Yep. And the question is, does it affect sales?
Yeah, it probably helps them if you had to guess.
It probably helps. That's the funny thing. Yeah. Almost always it helps.
Yeah. Well, when I watched the video, it was nice because they compared it to other screwdrivers in the field. And I have a Williams ratcheting screwdriver, and it was like, oh, it was in there, so it was compared right to his. And I'm like, then in the end, they're like, they're pretty close, and it's like twice the price. So,
Overall, if we summarize things, does it matter when people say negative things? Does it impact us? Does it hurt us? Does it hurt our feelings? And I would say sort of yes and no. Of course, we always try to improve the products, right? We want to deliver the best user experience, the best product, the lowest, everything. We want it to be the best, right? Of course. However, a lot of times the negativity actually ends up helping, which is very curious.
Well,
and a lot of times it's because of a misunderstanding or a misconception that they have about the product.
Well, the easy thing is there's a couple things that are at play there. One is, a lot of people are smarter than these reviewers or whoever are being negative about it are. They read between the lines.
Yeah.
A lot of people own the stuff and they're like, what the hell's he talking about? It's
people
like,
chiming in that actually use it. Yeah.
Yeah. So technically, in that sense, he's making himself. If you want to be really negative, you're kind of making yourself look.
If you
bad.
go too far, it's just
because it's like, well, something's wrong here. It's pretty obvious, and it's the same when people talk about full positive gushing reviews.
Right.
It's the same deal.
Same
like,
thing.
Whoa, this is perfect.
Something's wrong here. Oh, they must be paying them, blah, blah. Which, by the way, we don't pay reviewers.
Never paid a reviewer.
No, we've never had to. 30-some years that I've been doing this, through the whole time, we don't pay people.
I guess I should add to that. We get contacted all the time, like all companies do, to sponsor companies and channels and stuff like that. Yeah. There's a lot of companies that reach out to us that say, hey, do you want to pay for a review, is effectively what they say. But the number is always ridiculous. It's always like 10, 20, 50,000 for a meaningless review.
Well, that and the people that are asking for this are really not relatively small channels. They're not. We know that the results ain't going to happen. You're going to pay for something and not get results.
Right.
So the bottom line is,
we have never paid for a review.
Yeah, we don't pay people
I don't know if people would trust that.
Yeah.
You don't need to.
Right.
It's ridiculously expensive.
Well, the thing is we've got way more people asking to review our stuff than we can send product out for. I mean, the reality of it is the majority of the product is sold. It's not. We don't send 50 pieces out for review. Those 50 pieces have names on them already, And
well, it's kind of funny because it's almost counterintuitive. But the people that send out, just flood reviewers with units, those are the people that are typically making money on the product. They're making a lot of money.
Well, you can afford to
and they can afford to
out.
dump all these units out, which is
yeah.
funny because the consumer side is kind of sort of the opposite. It's almost always the case.
Well, I mean, that's, and I get that. I get that because they are used to, beats coming on a pallet from China or whatever.
Here's 5,000.
Yeah, right. There's just pallets and there's truckloads of this shit coming in the U.S. at a time. And it's a completely different market because you're just shuffling boxes. Where here, we're making these things one at a time. It feels more of a hand process. It's not, they're made, they're finished, they're assembled, they're tested. There's a whole it's a small group of people here. It's not a factory that's 2 football fields long.
Almost every time, everything everyone says is right, depending on your frame of reference.
Yeah.
That's the issue. So you need to kind of like figure out what it means, negative or positive. It all means something.
Elon would have a good one to go on this one right now.
You think so?
Yeah, for making
think so?
cars, absolutely, he'd have a good one. About that.
Production's hard.
Yeah.
That's his thing.
Yeah, people really like bashing
Everything's
Tesla.
right till it's wrong. I don't know, something. They have something definitely.
Yeah.
He comes up with some good ones sometimes.
Sometimes.
Just check his Twitter feed.
Yeah, he's got
Yes.
some tweets.
Anyway, everyone, thank you for watching, listening to our blabber today. Take care of yourselves. Thanks.